Welcome back to the Resilience Pod, the podcast helping you become resilient in our world full of disruptions. You're here with me, your host, Rena, saying thank you so much for tuning in today. I am truly grateful. As resilience professionals, how many times have you consciously and actively addressed the needs of your people living with disabilities in your emergency or crisis responses? Today, we are talking about the need to actively create inclusiveness in our resilience industry with my next guest, whose mission is all about making the world a better and safer and more accessible place for everyone. We are joined with someone who's been dealing with all this for so long, and actually since the early 90s has actually done stuff on this, where he helped his local high school rewrite their emergency plans and evacuation plans for people with disabilities. He has been involved in so many other incidences, and I am so excited to discuss this further because it's something that we often do not take into consideration. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming my very next guest on the Resilience Pod, the CEO for Disaster and Disability Consultants from New Jersey in the States, Nick Sicora. Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rena. How are you?
I'm
a bit
fine.
cold because it's a little difficult weather today, but other than that, I'm doing real well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on the pod and welcome. And totally relate to the cold weather because, hey, we're in the UK, so we feel the pains. Now, the reason why you're here and we're talking about this is because you offer a very unique perspective on the inclusion side of things and why we should be considering that as resilience professionals, being a resilience professional yourself. So what inspired you to take a focus on disaster and disability?
Well, I'm someone who's living with a disability. I was born with spina bifida. I'm paralyzed from my lower hips down. I use a wheelchair for mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And I found throughout my life, in my early years, there really wasn't a focus on my needs during an emergency, crisis, or disaster event. There was also a challenge and almost a fear.
Mm-hmm.
People hadn't really looked at it. But I grew up in the 70s and 80s. So people had really just had a view of, people with disabilities being an acceptable loss,
Yeah.
and things like that. And I always felt that there could be more done. And so I got more involved, and it led me to do a lot of research, take a lot of, courses. And I wanted to create opportunity because so many employers, while I was interviewing, always brought up a safety issue with me. And that stopped me from getting a lot of employment opportunities because of a lack of accessibility and a lack of their knowledge. So I really wanted to try and find this. And then in 2004, I got laid off from a contractor. And that's when I decided to, shortly after that, I opened up my own consulting firm. I have to apologize. It was 2006 that I got laid off, not 2004. So, and it's been a wild, crazy adventure ever since, but it's been very rewarding. And my overall hope is, like our motto says, that we want to make the world a safer, more accessible, and inclusive place so that future generations have even more opportunity than I've had. I've been very blessed to have a great opportunity, and I just want to give more, and hopefully future generations won't have to go through a few of the challenges that I've had.
Thank you, Nick. And I think it's really important. And I love how we've connected and we're sharing this story because often it's a challenge for you anyway, but then when you're building it into like a response, it's also another challenge. It's really interesting to hear your take on that, and it's really inspiring to see that then you've used that to your advantage and actually educating more people on this and started your own business, which I think is fantastic, and definitely something to aspire to for anybody that's watching or listening to us here. Now, when you've taken on this, like you've faced this kind of disadvantage, you've had all these experiences, and you created this disaster disability. And one of the things I mentioned in my introduction was, well, you actually helped your high school create plans, evacuation plans that help the organization like cater for people with disabilities. And that is fantastic, because I think a lot of us don't think about that. And that's why I asked the question, because honestly, if I put my hand up, I probably don't think about that as much as we should. So there's that inclusiveness needed. But you were also saying from previous conversations that you've been at the scenes of disasters and dealt with them. And what have been some of people's first reactions when they've seen you arrive there?
I get a variety of reactions. A lot of times I get what I call the deer in the headlight look, the real surprised, large eyeballs, because they don't expect somebody to come on scene who's in a wheelchair to be somebody providing assistance.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that, and usually that subsides once I start talking and understand. Or I also get people who look at me and say they can't believe that I'm the one that's going to help them because of all the challenges that I normally face, and that they're so surprised that someone in my situation with my disability would choose this as a career and as basically a life mission. So I do get a variety. I hopefully, as people get to know me, they hear me speak, they interact with me in a professional manner, they see that I do know and that I have the experience, and they focus less on my disability and more on my capabilities.
Resilience professional like we are, you're not anything less. Like, how have you overcome some of those challenges?
Well, people react to things that they don't experience normally. Mm-hmm. And even though there's 63 plus million Americans who are living with a disability as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, people don't come into contact with people with disabilities every day. And there's so many different disabilities out there.
Yeah.
There are obvious disabilities like myself. I mean, they see it because they see my wheelchair, but there are people that have hidden disabilities that you can't tell just by looking at them. So it's something, and I've come to realize that, and I don't let other people's stereotypes or opinions sway me from doing what I'm there to do. I do it, and I achieve the goal, and hopefully by doing that, that helps to change their outlook and their opinion of other people living with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what you said, the capability, right? And I think it's really important for us to, as we progress this and we get to the crux of it about what we can do as resilience professionals, is understanding a bit about you, your background, like some of the challenges you face. Because if we can't understand that, then we don't know how to address it. And whilst we fully won't be able to understand it, having that initial awareness is key. So bringing this conversation back to like, what should we be doing then? Because I asked this question at the beginning to my audience, what, first of all, what should we be like looking for, the tips we should be thinking, tips and the environment we should be looking at, and what we should include in specific planning?
Okay, well, one of the first things that we have to do is we have to create the legislation to make buildings and environments more accessible. Both of our countries have done that. There are disability laws out there that have to be enforced. We have to encourage people to want to do them. That makes it a huge difference and makes it easier when I come on scene for me to help somebody, if the infrastructure is in place that I can. The other thing that we have to do is we have to engage our community of people with disabilities and the organizations that serve them in the emergency management and resilience process. We have to teach them how the system works, because there's so many people out there who don't understand it, and they get a skewed view of it in the press and in the media and with politicians, that they don't understand it. So we have to explain how the system works. Then we have to bring them in and include people with disabilities in all aspects of any kind of resilience or emergency management, crisis management planning. We have to include them because, as I said earlier, there's so many different disabilities out there that no one person can know it all. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I'm 47 years old, and I can tell you, I regularly come across people with different disabilities that I've never heard of. And I have to go back and I have to research, or I have to ask them, okay, well, what does this enable you to do? And what are your needs? So that's the thing. As a person with a disability, I have to tell my story. I have to get my information out, and I have to be willing to work with the first responder community, the emergency management community, in letting them know what my needs are in a polite, manner, and then working with them to accomplish the goal.
I love that, because it's so simple. It's ask the person what they need rather than assume. And I think when we try to approach, generally when we're faced with approaching people with any type of disability, and you can't relate to that, the initial reaction is, oh no, I can't ask them about it. Like, how am I going to talk to you? And it's like, well, we're just talking like normal people, like as you would anybody. And asking is better than assuming, and then the plan is wrong.
Exactly. The more we get people involved, the better our planning and our outcomes will be. We have a responsibility to reach out to the community of people with disabilities and the organizations that serve them, and teach them about personal preparedness and resilience, so that they have the information, they can take the steps, and the organizations that serve them can work with them to meet their needs during an emergency, disaster, or crisis event.
Yeah, quite right. Now, in your experience, so you've personally faced this, and you've gone on to then like try and be the solution to it and offer this service, and get organizations to consider their emergency response plans and consider the disability aspects of it. Like, should there be a section in the plan that focuses specifically on that, or should it just be all encompassing, and then bear in mind, like, who are my people, and then take that a separate, like, always included in the plan? Like, how do we go about doing that?
Well, I've seen it both ways. I've seen addressing the issues and concerns of people with disabilities as an index or as an appendix, as an addition, and I've seen it in the actual plan addressed in each of the different sections. I believe, and I encourage people to address it in each individual section so that everybody can see it. It's there. It tells you when we're dealing with mass care, exactly what you have to do, exactly how the systems have to be set up, exactly what the requirements are. So it's not where you're trying to look at and go to two different things. It's right there. It's completely written out so that they understand it that way. That's how I always recommend doing it, because it makes it the easiest so that somebody can pick up a plan and instantly start rendering care.
Yeah, and I love that, because I think actually on reflection, that is probably the most easiest way, because I don't want to be flicking through, like I'm looking at my first page, I don't want to flick through page 10 and then flick back and forth. So it's understanding the practicalities of it. And I guess what I'm hearing is that's the preferred way, but it's really thinking about what works for the specific organization and the size
Right.
of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Different organizations use different methods. Here in the United States, we use the incident command method, and that spells out how we're supposed to set things up, how we're supposed to do things. And I'm sure in your country it's a bit different, but I believe in making it and spelling it out as simply as possible so that anybody can come in, grab a plan, know what's available, and know what they need to start doing to render assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely something that we should consider in all of our planning. And it's really interesting to hear your take on it, from actually helping organizations consider that. Now, just before it's a great insight, and before we kind of close off on it, when you go to organizations and you tell them, like, you need to consider, like, you've got some staff with some disabilities, some obvious, some are not, and you've got to incorporate into your plan, what is the first reaction that you get when you give that advice? Is it quite willing, or is there a resistance to look at that?
I've seen it all, to be honest.
Okay. You've seen it.
Some people have resistance because they think that these things are going to be too expensive, it's going to be too challenging, it makes it too difficult. It's easier to just not include people in community events or within the workplace, if they don't have to do all these extra. And part of my responsibility is showing them that there are very cost-effective ways to accomplish this. It doesn't even have to involve massive amounts of equipment and technology, but it's got to be just part of their normal everyday operations. And the benefits that a company can get from that are pretty much limitless, because if those companies that actively go out and actively recruit and actively have people with disabilities in their organizations out there in the community, they get such they're opening themselves up to, as I said earlier, almost 66 million Americans who are living with a disability. That's somewhere around 20% of our population here in the United States. That's a significant part. So we can't just ignore that amount of our population. And we're seeing that now in the pandemic. We've got to address that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, it's all about the inclusive world and everybody gets a fair chance. And I still think you offer such a unique position in that, because often or not, it's lots of people sitting around with no understanding of this and planning, whereas actually learning from somebody who's been through it, experienced it, knows the challenges is really important. And also, we have a duty of care. So you can't, as Nick said, exclude 20% of the population in America or the UK. You know, we have to think about these things and not brush it under the carpet because it's too hard.
Well, this is a global issue. It's not just
Yeah,
here in the United States.
it's a globe.
Right now, my company's focused on the US, but I will say we've had a tremendous response from organizations and government officials in the UK that want me to come over
Mm.
and want me to bring our programs. And I would love to do that. Um, this is something that we can do globally. This is something that we should be including, because there are so many people who have so many things to offer and so much talent out there that we're just, if we don't address these issues, we're really hurting our own cause. We're hurting our own economic capabilities, our own infrastructure, our own world. So it's something that we need to do, because as as a person, I've been living with my disability for years. I've
Yeah.
been living with it since birth. There are people who become disabled every single day. This is the one segment of the population that you can become a member of at any time. It's not just at birth. So we've got to address it. We're living longer. We're have incredible medical advances. So we've got to address being more inclusive and accommodating to people with disabilities.
Resilience, whether you're doing business continuity, emergency planning, crisis management, whatever, risk, cyber, it's still all about your people, our people. If you take anything away from today, is to really consider the words Nick has shared, and to question in your own organizations that, do we incorporate our evacuation plans or our emergency plans? Do we cater for people with disabilities? Is that something that is there? And it should be everybody's problem, not those who are dealing with it. So Nick, last final words before we head off. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, first of all, let me thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on your show, to talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about, but that's so very vital and important in today's society, really no matter where you live.
Yeah.
It's something that we really need to address, and it's great to see colleagues of mine like yourself who realize that and who want to be out there promoting it. I can't thank you enough. I hope your audience gains something from this, our time together. I'm available if they want to contact me. So, I hope people gain something from this today, and that we can build on this and create more opportunities in the future.
Yep, absolutely, Nick. Thank you so much once again. To you, very grateful. And to you guys who are either listening or watching us, thank you for having an open mind and bearing this in mind. Please do take what we've discussed into consideration seriously and challenge your organizations and yourself and your own thinking about this, because that's what resilience essentially is all about. If you enjoyed this episode, then please do like and share. Come and join us over on the Resilience Pod podcast page on LinkedIn, or visit www.resiliencepod.com for more information and first dibs on all new content for free. This is me, your host, Rena Singh, saying thank you. And until next time, keep on investing in your resilience.